профессиональную медицинскую и юридическую помощь и помогут получить максимальную компенсацию. 503-261-71-21. 503-261-71-21.
Попали в аварию? Звоните 503-760-07-78. Клиника Pacific Chiropractic. 503-760-07-78.
Внимание жителей Портленда и пригородов! Всем вам полюбившаяся аптека Биовита Витамин Шоп, которая располагалась в магазине Сити Макс, теперь находится в магазине Plenty Food and Deli по адресу 9972 South East, 82-я авеню в Хаппи-Валли и уже открыта для посетителей. Это всего в 10 минутах езды от старого адреса. У нас вы найдете широкий выбор знакомых препаратов из России и Украины, Европы, Азии и других стран, лучшие цены, самую выгодную систему скидок и бонусов. И, конечно, наше знаменитое гостеприимство. Это единственная аптека, где вам помогут связаться с врачом по телефону и получить необходимую консультацию по применению того или иного препарата. И, конечно, как всегда, вас ждет самый доброжелательный и доступный сервис на вашем языке. Просторная, чистая и уютная аптека Биовита Витамин Шоп с нетерпением ждет вас. Приходите уже сегодня на день открытых дверей, и вы, как всегда, получите большие скидки и подарки от нашей аптеки. Адрес 9972 South East, 82-я авеню в Хаппи-Валли. Внутри магазина Plenty Food and Deli. Справки по телефону 971 242 85 96 или 206 272 09 96.
Департамент здравоохранения штата Орегон рекомендует гражданам соблюдать социальную дистанцию и носить маски в общественных местах. Если вы или ваши близкие получили положительный тест на COVID-19, очень важно, чтобы вы оставались дома в самоизоляции. Если вам нужна помощь во время вашего карантина, свяжитесь с представителями Славянского общественного центра. Наши сотрудники помогут вам с покупкой и доставкой еды, а также помогут частично оплатить ваши коммунальные расходы и аренду во время вашего карантина. Мы также поможем вам подать заявки на долгосрочную помощь на такие программы, как SNAP, Medic ID и другие программы штата. Звоните 971-225-71-23. Славянский общественный центр. 971-225-71-23.
Внимание! Редакция медиахолдинга Slavic Family не несет ответственность за содержание рекламных сообщений и авторских программ.
You are listening to KXPD 1040 AM, Radio Slavic Family.
Новости региона, выборы, кандидаты, стремления. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live дает голос славянской общине по всему северо-западу. Мы говорим и информируем о важном в Вашингтоне, Орегоне, Калифорнии. По четвергам в 17:00. Присоединяйтесь к прямому эфиру на 10:40 AM. Ищите Slavic Vote в соцсетях. Мы намерены продолжать продвигать свое видение и оказывать любую необходимую поддержку сообществу, чтобы изменить ситуацию к лучшему. Slavic Vote Live.
Slavic Vote Live у нас сегодня в прямом эфире. И для тех, кто нас не видит, а для тех, кто нас только слышит, не забудьте, что после Slavic Vote надо еще поставить восклицательный знак, тогда вы поймете, насколько это важно. Подключайтесь 10:40 АМ и, конечно, на каналах YouTube и Facebook Live Slavic Family. И сегодня у нас, как обычно, я очень рад вам представить Дмитрия Сашенко, который является исполнительным директором Slavic Vote. И сегодня вместе с ним будет Лилия Жукова. Она является legal counsel, то есть она, я так понимаю, занимается правовой базой, правовой информацией. Добрый день, вы в прямом эфире.
Добрый день, спасибо еще раз за такую прекрасную возможность быть на этих волнах. Сегодня очень хорошая погода, я думаю, люди едут сейчас с работы и имеют такую классную возможность иметь хорошую погоду. Лилия, как у тебя дела?
Прекрасно.
С нами Лилия Жукова, я думаю, многие знают уже Лилию. Она ехала очень долгое время сюда, в Портленд, с Ванкувера, и мы ей всегда благодарим. Как сегодня трафик?
Actually, у меня обычно нормально, когда
Да?
я сюда
Да?
еду. Yeah.
Отлично, отлично. Ну да, погода хорошая. Также у нас будет очень интересная тема. Мы эту тему потихоньку немножко напоминали в бывших передачах. И сегодня мы просто хотели больше зайти больше в тему в эту. Эта тема называется сегодня, или программа, будем говорить по поводу midterm elections. Или по-русски, если перевести это, я думаю, средние выборы или выборы, которые будут обычно проходят посередине президентских и посередине президентских и этих выборах. И это обычно сенаторы, обычно представители. Это считается очень важные выборы, даже, может быть, даже важнее, чем президентские выборы. Если вы немножко наблюдаете насчет, что происходит в Америке, я думаю, вы будете знать, что эти выборы очень важные, и мы сегодня хотели бы немножко об этом поговорить. Но сегодня мы будем говорить на английском языке, и я надеюсь, вы останетесь с нами и будете продолжать слушать эту передачу. Мы немножко об этой теме проводили эту тему в прошлом месяце или 2 месяца назад на русском языке. Если вы хотите немножко, если вы не понимаете по-английски и хотели бы больше понять, о чем мы сегодня говорили, и также о бывших выборах, вы можете найти наши передачи все на нашем YouTube-канале, который просто наберите Slavic Vote, там есть и русские передачи, и американские, просто на YouTube Slavic Vote или Slavic Vote Live, вы можете все это найти. Которые выборы мы будем говорить, это будут проходить в Орегоне, Вашингтоне и по всей стране. Тех, кто живут в Вашингтоне, это будут выборы в августа, я точно не вспоминаю, когда будут выборы. 12 августа, да. А в Орегоне будут мая 17-го. Опять, это очень важные выборы, будут там губернаторы, будут там и другие представители. Я думаю, очень важные будут выборы. Я думаю, многие, кто живет в Орегоне, уже давно ждали, пока будут выборы на губернатора, и уже будут рады, что будет перебирание на губернатора. И тот губернатор, который с нами сейчас, Кейт Браун, она уже не сможет перебираться, и вот у нее уже закончилось ее время, и будем нового губернатора перебирать. Очень важно, и перед тем, как мы перейдем на английский язык, я хочу напомнить, что если вы хотите голосовать в этих выборах, важнее в предварительных выборах на эти выборы, вам нужно быть зарегистрированным правильно. Это значит, что вы должны быть зарегистрированы, не только быть зарегистрированы, чтобы голосовать, вы также должны быть зарегистрированы с одной из 2 партий. Это или республиканцы, или демократы. Это очень важно. Если вы не зарегистрированы в этих 2 партии, тогда вы, к сожалению, не сможете участвовать полностью в этих выборах. И вот сегодня мы тоже немножко об этом коснемся, почему это так работает, почему это важно, и поговорим также опять Вашингтон, Орегон, какие там выборы будут, и какие кандидаты, и опять важность этих выборов. И надеюсь, вы остаетесь с нами, и мы будем продолжать. Thank you, Lily, once again for joining me today. It's really good to have you. I know you're a busy person. You're constantly on the road.
Yeah.
You're constantly on your phone, nonstop. What I think what saves you or makes you not go sane or crazy is your organization skills. I think you're so organized that any other typical person, I think, would crash and burn and would just go hide in the corner.
Getting there though.
Yes. Well, I think you're doing a great job, and tell us a little bit what you're doing right now.
I think right now focus is, so I went from doing a little bit of exemptions, so COVID vaccine exemptions, to now really focusing on Ukrainians arriving here. So I don't want to call them refugees because not everybody gets that status. We're learning that, through Mexican border, they're getting a parole. They're traveling a lot by visa. So we're, focusing on extending their visas and things like that. And then you get a small portions that are coming in as refugees. Unfortunately, I have to say it's a small portion because U.S. doesn't accept Ukrainian refugees at this time, right? So they have to find other venues like Canada or Mexico, and you don't get that status there. So it's posed a whole new world of learning. First of all, refugee status is a lot different when it comes to obtaining benefits here. So if you're a parole, you don't get benefits from the federal government. So you only have to rely on state. So like state medical insurance and state, any benefits that you typically get. But unfortunately, you don't get federal support, which is always challenging for folks. But, it's just more of navigating learning. There's still things, people can do. It's just, it's harder than 2014 when it was just U.S. accepted refugees and they came legally and didn't have to cross any borders of that sort. But outside of that, there is still ways that you can make it work. It's just a lot more harder.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Again, thanks for the work that you do. I think the community appreciates it, and they're always looking for assistance like this. That's very rarely to find. So that's why you're so busy, because you're one of a kind. So
thank you.
Thank you. We usually don't cover current events on these programs, but today it's kind of a historic day. You might be able to talk about it if you want to, but I guess the Supreme Court decision, they've voted in the first African-American Black female.
Oh, wow, I missed that.
So
Being busy today.
yeah, that happened earlier today. I know there's a mixed feelings about the whole thing.
What was the vote like?
It was 53 by 47, I think. Yeah, that's what it was.
So a few Republicans voted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it was probably Romney, and I mean, who else there would be? Romney is the main one.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that was interesting. Historic. I think for the community, it's not going to be very good news for the most part, just because the judge is very progressive, if you want to call it that way.
Absolutely.
So again, we always talk about elections have consequences. If folks are not happy with the decision of President Biden selecting this judge, that's why it's so important to vote in elections so we can choose the right president that you're happy with.
And so let's transfer that into midterms, right?
Yep.
So I asked you a question of what were the votes like, right? Because what I wanted to hear was it was 51-50 or vice versa, right? Because what I wanted to hear is that we either pulled one Democrat or we secured a conservative vote, right? And that's what we're looking at this midterm, right? The biggest, I think, any election that we're looking at is just to get a seat in Senate, because we're currently 50-50 plus that one, which is VP. And so we're always losing, right? The last 2 years. So we want to go back into having a secured seat, which is pull 1 or 2 seats in Senate. And when I say that, it's congressional. So that way we can, the next few years, as we move forward, Senate takes a really big role, right? So we're not just judges, confirmations, any impeachment hearings, right, for presidents. Senate is your final, I want to call it, in a sense, it's the biggest place that has authority, even though there's checks and balances or whatever. I still think that there was a reason why the government was set up the way it was, to give Senate so much more authority, if, it was in the party favor that you liked it. So this midterm, right, if we're looking at the most important thing, if we're not voting for anything else, but we're just focusing, it's going to be the Senate. So those Senate seats that are up for re-election, those Senate seats that are folks that are running, those are the seats that we want to vote on. Because if we don't and we stay or lose, the next 2 years are going to look similar or worse.
Yep.
They won't get better. At least I don't anticipate to. This administration has not, if we think of State of the Union address, that's like your 2-year roadmap, and he did not indicate that it's going to be better, right? So that's going to be your biggest. So I think for folks really thinking about time, if they don't know what candidates to vote, just vote at least for the Senate position.
Yeah. Well, in Oregon, for example, we have, I think we actually have some decent candidates that are coming up now that are going to be running against the current incumbents.
Okay.
So that's going to be interesting to watch. I know at least 1 or 2 candidates that are excellent. I know in previous years there was always kind of a disappointment. So I'm looking forward to this year. I think there's actually some chance of us in Oregon picking up more than just what we have now. In Oregon, we have just 1 Republican representative, and the rest are Democrats, about 6 or 7. And then also we're adding another seat this year.
From the census.
Yeah, so we'll see. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. So, and in Washington, I will say the gal who's running, she's ran before 6 years ago. I want to say 6 years, because it's every 6 years. She's ran before. She's lost 6 years ago, so she's trying to run again. She's in the King County side, but Senate, you don't have to be. You represent the state, right? So I don't know if I want to say with confidence that I can see us, really changing. And then for her to, win. I'm always hopeful, but I think I'm also realistic. But I know that, our seat may be a little bit harder, but other states. So as folks are engaging with candidates, in other states that are a little bit more favorable to their views, I think those are going to be the top positions. It might not be Washington, Oregon, but as long as, wherever the community's at, wherever they're voting, those other states, not missing that chance. But I'm with you. I'm still hopeful, but I don't know if we can change, 30 years of bureaucracy that way. But there's still chances. I think House will be easier, right? In the House, everybody's up, so there's a lot more. It's a lot of easier position, and I feel like, you can definitely make a little bit of a change there. However, I will say Washington isn't looking that good. First of all, we've got 4 folks within one party, 4 or 5. I lose count these days. And then you've got one on the Democratic side, and who's very quiet, very, kind of, and they usually do this. They're really great about staying quiet till the end. And that's when they get really, really effective. And I think something that we just don't tend to pick up well. But and so there's going to be a split of votes. And what does that mean? That means you're going to have voting for likes and dislikes of each candidate that are within one party. And so who will make it to the primary, to the general, so from primary to general, is going to be hard to say. But I'm just hopeful that it's not, 2 Democrats in the general election for us in Washington. But at the same time, I think also a lot of it is hard to say. I will say personal experience. So I know I'll get a little political here, and I can, but so I know a lot of folks have, disliked the current incumbent for our 3rd congressional district, especially the Slavic community, just because of some choices she's made last year.
And
but I will say, I think I'll keep that. It's Jamie Hero Butler. But I will say, in this time that I've been working, her office has been the go-to, like expediting visas, expediting permanent residence, expediting casework. Like, her office has been my go-to. Understanding adoption processes, expediting adoptions for people that have already cases going. Like, her office has been go-to, very efficient. For some folks who are traveling through Mexico, additional support her office has done is they've written letters in support, which has worked great for 2 families that had no issues. Even though their kids didn't have passports, they were able to travel just fine because they had that additional, congressional seal letter, right? It makes a huge difference on a Mexican border. So her office has done a great job. And so I feel like, community is picking up on that. And that's what we're going to see. So it's hard to, I think, enter elections knowing for sure, because current events are going to change the landscape and kind of where we look at and who to vote for. But I know, Slavic Vote and, kind of whatever voter guide people use, whatever it is, really looking at where those folks stances are, or stands, or wherever they stand on issues is going to be the critical thing. I think you can't just look at a person and say, they're an R, I'm going to vote for them. You got to look a little deeper.
Well, do you think, so I know on our voter guides, we always had a category securing the southern border, or being just tough on borders, or tough on just in general immigration. I think this is the first year that our community is affected by it, where I don't know if the community is going to be as strong on that particular issue, just because it's so personal now.
Oh, that's such a good, I thought about it too. So for 2 years, we did always had immigration. No, first year. And then we took it off because people just weren't interested in that. Like, they just didn't have a point of view. But they weren't fans of illegal crossings.
Right.
We did know that, right? And so the Slavic community, I think, has absolutely changed. I would say, but the folks that have changed it aren't going to be the voters.
Yeah.
I
I personally still believe what's going on. I mean, I think it's crazy that we're thinking that, people can come from the southern border, that it's okay, that it's normal.
Well, I will say 2 things. I think Slavic community is a little different when we say they're crossing the border. First of all, Mexico and U.S. jointly created a resolution to allow a green light for border crossing. But that doesn't mean that they're crossing without documentation. Right. So they're all applying for a visa. There's a Mexican, I forgot. There's a name for it. It's in my mind. Maybe it'll come. But there's a form they fill out as they're traveling from Europe to Cancun. Typically is their first stop before they get to Tijuana or another city. And there's a form they fill out. So before they get on the plane, they're required to fill out a form that will allow them to enter Mexico. From there, from Cancun, they typically get transportation. And then, in fact, Mexico offers support like stay, hotel for some families, like if you got, a lot of kids and stuff. So I think immigration through Mexico is a lot different from the Slavic community than other communities because it is all legal, which means they do get parole for a year. They get a stamp, I-94. They get departure, like arrival stamped. It's in the system. Literally every person I look up, I can look up their arrival information.
Well, why not come directly to United States?
Because United States doesn't have a visa available.
Still,
So United States doesn't accept straight from Europe to US. There's no ability to cross that. So I don't know why they honestly didn't do that versus doing this through Mexico. But I think what happened is during a big flood, Mexico was still allowing these folks to come through and then reached out to US, obviously, and said, hey, what do you want us to do? Like, do you want us to close the border or do you want us to continue doing what we're doing? Because the initial group that did travel didn't have this documentation track. I will say that. So they did get arrested. Their passports were taken, and they didn't get an I-94 arrival. So they were illegally crossing. They had to be in prison for 4 years, federal prison on the U.S. side. So the initial group that did travel, but now the group that are traveling, it is absolutely legal, which means they do get an I-94, they get paroled, they have to fill out paperwork, they keep their passports, everything. So it gives them an opportunity to come here, apply for Social Security, get a driver's license, and then wait up to 8 months and then apply for permanent residence. So it's established that way. And I honestly, it's hard for me to, I don't know why US didn't do straight off because that would have been ideal. But at the same time, talking with Jamie's office is the infrastructure isn't there, right? So Canada had to build a full-on infrastructure for an application, how they were going to do the biometrics, everything. Well, guess what? Mexico had that infrastructure already because they've been processing illegal immigrants for as long as that border exists, right? So it was really easy for US to say, hey, let's do it. You've got the infrastructure, you've got the process, you've got those visas, you know how to do parole, let's do that, right? So in a way, it's a great partnership. So in a way it worked. But I will say the community on immigrations, I really still believe that our community will always be conservative on this issue, meaning they want to come here legally. Because when you arrive here on with no documents, nothing, it's hard to get any services. It's hard to go anywhere, right? I'm not here to say, but, the Hispanic community lives on illegal Social Securities. That's not what our community wants. They don't want to hide.
right.
There's a few that might do, but most of them with 3 kids, they don't want to do that. In fact, everybody I've worked with thus far, the one question is, how can I start working? And the first thing is we apply for social. It takes up to 3 months. And so they're trying to find ways because they don't want to rely on all of that government support. They do want to get out there. They do want some support to get them going, right? Because they need it. But they want to start working. In fact, I have my sister-in-law's family is traveling here and they'll be here end of this week. But they're already asking, she's a hairstylist. She's like, where can I get a job? We're already, got him set up for taking his CDL, the husband, to start working trucking. They don't want to just sit. Like, they're ready to, let us go to work, we'll pay, we'll contribute. And that's the big difference.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think it just brings up the main question that our immigration system, or the whole question is broken, or this was just like a bandage on it. And it's a question that we always have to come back to is we need to reform our immigration in general. I think
right, we do, absolutely. And I mean, that's a whole nother thing on another subject
and
to talk
we won't
about.
get into that today.
But I'll give you a pause to do some of your announcements.
Yeah, I just wanted to, like always, just want to thank all of our sponsors. We have great sponsors who do a great work in the community. That are businesses, that are nonprofits, and a lot of them that support us either financially or in other ways. And I just want to do a quick shout out. One of those folks I want to just mention is Pilmeni. They're always been a great business who is just here locally that does a great Pilmeni dumplings, Russian dumplings, Russian-Ukrainian dumplings. American Best Realty, Solution 8020, Ciberoni, and Third House Media. Those are a few that I want to just mention today. But without them, we couldn't really be here and do a lot of this good work. So thanks to them, and thanks to Lily, like always. She's done a lot of good work with us.
Question:
for
Are
a long time.
dumplings Russian or Ukrainian?
I think you depends who you ask.
No, but
I mean,
where-
I
did
think
you know
Asian.
where they
I think
originate?
Asia is the original.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing at least.
Okay. Which is gonna be Russia, because half of Russia is Asia.
True, but we won't get into that.
No, I know. I'm just curious. Actually, I never thought
Yeah,
about it. I should
yeah.
ask parents, like, who
For
is
sure.
the first.
I
They
remember
came up
looking
with
into it. I think Asia was kind of the original, and because they have so many different varieties.
They do. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
And we
So
just have this variety.
I'll sneak Russia into that. Okay.
Sounds good. Well, I think we just want to really dive deep into the conversation about the midterm elections. You know, we already
Yes.
briefly talked about it. You want to kind of kick it off with the Washington side, and then I'll just talk a little bit about the Oregon
Sounds
side.
perfect. Yeah. So we've got midterms. So let me just do a quick 2-minute spiel on a midterm. Dima, I think, did a great job of saying it's your half of your presidential election, right? It's your midpoint. It happens the same year that a State of the Union address happens, and it happens 2 years after a president is elected and 2 years before a new one's elected, right? It's that midpoint. And what makes midterms so much more important is it determines, so if you've disliked the last 2 years, it determines your next 2 years, right? So this is your, instead of having to wait 4 years, as in like Europe when it's parliament and it's 4 years, right? You got to wait 4 years and you don't have anything in between. It's hard. It's hard to live, not making any change. But here we get an opportunity to potentially change the next 2 years. And so we get to vote, right? So midterms is really focused on Congress. We're talking about Senate, half of Senate, or 1/3. Is it 1/3 or half?
It's usually one
1/3.
third.
Thank you. And then full House of Representatives. And then it's also the year that you get state election, right? But midterms, the word itself is coined based on congressional elections, not because states don't have midterms.
Right.
Because it's just we're always having elections of some sort. So so that's kind of a brief on that. And so again, the purpose is to kind of change the next 2 years. And in Washington, we've got House of Representatives that are up, all of them, for all the states. And then we've got a senator, one for us that's running for re-election, and we have a new one.
Could you briefly describe the difference between the senators and representatives and some of the roles, if they do have any major roles differences?
Yeah, so House it's always been based on population, right? So that's why you have tons of them. And Senate, they're based on, you have 2 per state. That's how the Constitution was set up. And the reason you have difference in those two is because Senate is supposed to be your stable maker, right? It's the stability. It doesn't change as much. That's why they have 6-year term. And House, they're changing every 2 years because they represent the people. So we want to be constantly changing, reevaluating. Are they doing a good job? And, founding fathers thought 2 years was good enough to be able to determine that. Personally, I think it's quite quick. 2 years, it goes by super fast. But then I wouldn't want it 4 years because then I feel like a president is 4 years can sometimes feel a really long time.
Yeah.
So, and then in state of Washington, it's a little different. We have Senate for 4 years and then House too. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Their jobs vary substantially in the sense of they're both working to represent people and they work, but your people kind of pleaser, if you may call, is going to be your representative. It's going to be from your house. It's the person that's going to actually do something for you, right? So that's why I'm not getting help from Senate necessarily. I'm getting help from House for all the Ukrainian refugees, right? It's because the intent is those are your people pleaser.
Right.
And they're more frequently in re-election, so they're more interested to get things done for you as a voter, versus Senate is a little bit more of, that's why they have those higher positions of, they're the only ones that get to impeach a president. They're the only people that get to actually, confirm a judge, right? Because they take a little bit more intellectual, more law-based things versus your House is your daily operations. It's what runs the state, what gets people what they need. If you aren't getting your welfare check, why not? They're the ones that can help you with that, right? So is that kind of what you were thinking?
For the most part, yeah. And I think one thing that I wanted to touch on, I think even myself originally, I was confused because I've always followed like the national or the federal level, but then you start hearing the state senators and state representatives. So that made things confusing. So if you can maybe touch on that a little bit, just why is there the state version compared to the national version?
Right. Oh man, it's because of separation. Well, not separation of powers. It's because the way the government is set up, and you have the same thing in city. It's the mayor
Yep.
and then council members. They're obviously called differently, but the goal is the same. Is because, I mean, could you imagine living in Oregon and having only one representation, and that's in Congress? And could you imagine how many people had to call you, and would you ever get help? No. And that's why you have separation of services, and that's why state senators and representatives focus on different types of services. So for example, if it's you're not getting your welfare check, that's not a state issue because welfare is a federal service. So you're going to go to your House rep in Congress, right? But same thing with Social Security. If you're retiring and you've got some issue there, it's not a state issue because that service is provided by Fed. But let's say you want to get state insurance, health insurance, right? You're going to go to your state. Well, now I think that's changed. It used to be also federal, but now you're going to go to your state House representatives or your senator to get your help because that's a state service. And so that's kind of, I think, the biggest difference. And a lot of people will that come to me, or Slavic community, for example. This is good. Back in 2019, when a lot of folks were concerned about some of the things, all of a sudden they were like, let's call Jamie, let's call Jamie. And I said, why are we calling Jamie? You're asking about a legislation for education that's state-based. That's a state-based service that federal isn't. Jamie can't do anything about it. You know, that's Department of Education up at the congressional level is a lot different. They don't get to focus on little things, right? And so it's a state. So you have to call your senator, your representative in the state. So the community has always been like, well, we just called the big guys. It's hard because their roles are different. I always say, think of wherever the service is provided. So if it's a federal service, you call your federal folks. But if it's your state service, you're going to call. And the same thing for local jurisdictions, right? So if you're worried about a stop sign right here, that's not going to be your state representative.
Right.
That's going to be your local, code enforcement somewhere, your council member, who's then going to refer you to a code enforcement
Right.
if you want a pedestrian sign here or whatever, right? So that's, you are not going to call your house. So again, wherever the service, I think the best way is wherever the service is at, whoever provides that service is the person.
Right.
And that's where their roles vary.
Right. And the only thing that kind of stays the same, or the idea is every level of government, one thing that they have common is the three branches of government. So that's one how I kind of makes sense to me. You got three branches of government, and the city, the state, the federal, they all have their own level of their own governance.
Yeah, except
they're
your
independent.
right, and your Fed and state are literally same. Your local is the one that changes because you don't have a senator at the state level, right? You're going to have a mayor who's like a governor, and
Right.
you're going to have city council, but it's districts, it's precincts, it's not like. But if you think of federal and state, it's literally the same.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I learned when we had Vadim on earlier, who's running for city council, no, actually James Ball, he's running for Metro. So that makes things even more, in bigger cities. Now you got like different levels of city
Yeah,
almost that
exactly.
oversee, and so that's interesting. It's very confusing,
absolutely.
but it can be very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's like I served on an advisory a year or two ago, and I represented Clark County, even though I was a resident of City of Vancouver.
Right.
But I represented the county at large, which meant that's like 6-7 cities, versus there was actual representative for City of Vancouver that he just represented the City of Vancouver.
Right.
I had to represent 6 other cities because I was at Clark County at large. And it's always like that. So in some positions like that, right? So counselors for county are going to represent the county, which means it's going to be City of Vancouver, Richfield, Washougal, Camas, right? Everything else. So same as Metro, right? And Portland has a little bit more complex too, because you not just have the Metro, you've got City of Portland, and then Multnomah County.
Right.
So you have actual additional something we don't have
Bunch
in
of layers,
Vancouver.
yeah. I know that they're currently in this year they're going through charter changes.
Okay.
So that could change. There's actually some changes that are going to be pretty interesting and dramatic, and even up to a point of like how we vote, specifically with like the ranking voting. And I hear
hopefully that doesn't pass.
I hear good things on both sides, and I don't know how to decide.
Oh no! If you look at the states that do, I think everybody should always look at states that do rank voting, and then caucuses, and really look at, is it doable? Because that's why Iowa caucus is called the way it is based on its history in the state. And so every time like Washington has wanted to do that, and I was like, no, it's not going to work for this environment here, because we don't pay for time off for election day. Some states have that. So I'm like, we can't expect folks to take time off and come here. Which employer is going to allow that? No
Right.
one's going to.
I think there's actually some conversation about making it easier.
Yeah,
for
federal
election
government
day.
has talked about it for a few times too, making it a national holiday. Oh, that's been proposed. I mean, they can't even get rid of daylight savings. It's been a
Well, they
3-year
did,
conversation.
didn't
No,
they?
it hasn't moved. So they're gonna. I think it's still pending Biden's signature or something. It went through Senate.
I just watched the video yesterday on why it's a bad idea.
Yeah,
It made sense.
I mean, a lot of countries in general and have moved from daylight savings as is. But I know Washington, we've had it a few times introduced as well. It's just like one of those tipsy subjects, I guess, that is like, you know, do you want to change? I don't know.
Well, there was the argument that it'll actually people will die. That's how far this video went.
Electric companies are loving it.
They might. I think they're talking about you know, it's going to be a certain time of the year. It's going to be dark like at 4:00, and their kids still coming home from school. So like.
Well, it is right now.
It's a stretch.
Winter time, what, like 4:00 is dark pitch out there.
Well, from last time I checked, I think it was getting close to being passed. So I don't know. We'll keep you guys updated on that one. So you talked about the Washington side.
Yes.
Very very interesting, and I think.
What's Oregon looking like?
So Oregon is,
this?
you know, a lot of this overlaps what you mentioned. So I'm not gonna repeat too much, but I think the biggest difference is Oregon. We have closed primaries. And then we have open primaries in Washington. That sounds very confusing if you hear this for the first time. And all that means is, I mean, one of the explanations, and I think you give a good explanation. In fact, I'll just have you go ahead and explain the cake situation.
Oh. Well, okay. The reason I shared that, people ask me, is because the Slavic community with tea, all we have is sweets, right? We can't never sit down and just have tea, you know?
Right.
I was over at a friend's house yesterday, and they just can't do tea with nothing. It's just not going to happen. But and so a lot of times when people describe, like in Washington, you're always getting the full cake every election. You're just getting the full cake. You don't have to split it. You're not going to miss anything. But in Oregon, you know, if you're thinking about closed primaries and between primaries and a general in a closed primary election, is ultimately you get to see only one half of the pie, if not less, right? Because it's only 2 candidates coming out from each. So what you get to miss is to decide what goes on that cake. You get to miss to decide what frosting, anything goes on that, because you're not part of a party during the primaries. So all you get to see, so all that gets made up in May, right? All those people get to decide, they vote what goes on that cake. And then if you're not participating, then you just get to see what's left.
And you mentioned the people that are deciding, and the people that are deciding are the people who are registered with the party.
Yep.
So, you know, again, in Washington, everybody votes, everybody participates. In Oregon, it's closed. There's a reason for it, but essentially, there's a certain amount of group of people who are registered with the party itself, and a lot of people confuse that with, like, you know, enrolling or putting your allegiance to Republicans or Democrats. It's nothing like that. When you register to vote and you select a party, all you're doing is just saying, I want to vote in this primary, or in this party primary, or I want to vote with this party. That's all it really is. You're not, you know, in order to be a part of a party, it's a separate subject. It's called, you know, part of it is called precinct committee person. You get elected into the party.
And you're not picking, you know, the party. It's like just you're picking what they stand for, which is, if you ever doubt, you know, what the party stands for, Slavic Vote has the info, which is there's the platform, and that's what the Republicans is. So if that's what you agree, at least most of the time, then that's the party you're going to go with. And if you agree with most of the time with Democrats, then that's the party. And you can change that. I've had a lot of questions. I don't know if you've had, but people are like, well, can I change that from election to election? Absolutely. Space your time out to make sure you're registered enough so that you're getting the ballot, you know, a month before the election, to make sure you're getting the right ballot with the right party. You can change that. I mean, it's up to you to manage that. Because the elections office isn't going to do that for you. You just have to fill out an updated form. But you can do that.
And the platform that you're referring to, it's a party platform. And if you're looking at it and you think the Republican platform is not conservative enough, or it's not progressive enough, you can actually do something about it.
Wow.
I mean, it's a process. But I actually had the privilege of actually participating in that process. You know, you essentially become a delegate to the party. you get voted in as a precinct committee officer person, and you have a chance to actually go into this conference where you vote what things to remove, what things to add. And it's a very interesting process
Yeah.
where you
But
can
let's
actually,
take it a step at
Yeah,
a time.
it's
The Slavic community,
correct,
we got to
yeah.
start with the vote.
correct, but it just shows that our system is designed where everybody can participate and nothing is really solid. You can change it. Whoever's most active
You
is
just need to invest your time
Exactly.
and effort. It's just not going to be as given out to
Yeah.
you like a free ticket.
exactly.
Absolutely.
If you're expecting to vote every 4 years that you're gonna get the right president, but you're not participating in other elections, it's not gonna really happen.
Absolutely.
So it's only going to get harder and harder. And that's why I think right now we're kind of seeing this pendulum, which I don't think it's switched yet, where we're, in Oregon, we're seeing a lot of, candidates that we're disappointed about. But I think as more people participate because they see the kind of the disappointment, I think the pendulum will slowly start turning. I hope that's how the history usually shows. Things are looking a little different, but we'll see. But anyway, so.
But that's going to require everybody's vote.
Correct.
Because we can't do it without
Right.
the votes. And if people think that by sitting and doing nothing is how they're gonna get what
Right.
they want, it's just not gonna
Right.
happen. I mean, that's just life as is.
Right.
You're gonna get some things that are gonna be a blessing, but it's you gotta step up into the field, or you gotta do something
Yeah.
to make that happen.
Well, I was just thinking about this today. The majority of the people who left the state, who are not happy, they're gone. I think the majority of people that are here now,
they're still moving.
They're still moving, but I think the biggest flow have done what they wanted to do. But the point is that people who are here, they decided that they have to stay here because maybe they have a big family, they can't afford to move, or they have business and they can't afford to move. They have to do something. They can't just sit and continue not voting. I think it's important to, in order to see the change, you have to start getting active, and that's why again we're here to help with that process, and we're here to explain and just navigate to make sure your voice is heard and we can actually start changing things around.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit on Washington, but Dima, what are some top positions people got to be looking at in the Oregon side?
And like you mentioned, I think Senate is going to be very important, and there's going to be again our senior senator. That's one way I call it. I think it's Walden or one of the names. I forget his name right now, but he's being reelected now, so his term is over. And previously we've had kind of some folks who are running who we don't really know about, but this time we actually have a businessman who sounds like has a lot of potential. I mean, we have others that are interesting candidates, but I think this guy probably has the finances that usually that is the issue. You don't have enough finances to run these big elections, and these are like,
it's like what,
million.
1 million?
Yeah, it's like you have to raise
$1 million
millions of dollars for a lot of these.
Well, you got to do like $1 million for a state.
Well,
sometimes.
Yeah,
which is
exactly. Well, I think
crazy.
South Carolina, Lori, whatever his name is, I think he was most expensive election last year.
I mean,
or 2
every
years ago.
election for state,
Yeah.
Senate.
Lindsey
it's just
Graham.
crazy.
I think that was the most expensive
Oh, wow.
election in South Carolina,
Okay.
and for a Senate seat. But anyway, so that's going to be a very important position that people are going to be seeing and voting for. Obviously, all the House representatives are going to be up for election, and this year, again, we mentioned earlier, there's going to be additional seat added. That is there's going to be no incumbent. There's going to be nobody that
Just a
is
fresh
currently filling that position. So that's going to be interesting because now you don't have that incumbent.
statistics
exactly.
that tends to say they win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Right,
We had,
and then you don't have any lookups too, saying, "Well, this is how you vote." Well,
right.
no,
Exactly.
fair.
So that'll be interesting. Obviously, we have a few interesting city positions, Portland City positions that are going to be up for election. We had Vadim on. He shared a few things. We had James on. I think those are some of the interesting positions that we actually have a chance of winning that are more aligned with the Slavic community. And then I think in general, obviously the governor position is going to be probably what's going to drive most of the people to the ballots is that governor position. And we have plenty of good candidates that I'm excited about. And I think you had interaction with one or two so far. I think you had Bridget. You saw Bridget a few days.
Yes, but I've never talked
Yeah,
to her,
right.
or I don't know what they stand on.
Have you been following the governor in Oregon?
I trust you. half the time.
There's like 15, 16 candidates.
Oh my gosh.
I would say 10 of them are pretty interesting people.
I'm just disappointed from 32 candidates in Washington. We didn't
Yeah.
even pull one.
Well, it's
So
going
at
to be
this
uphill
point-
battle. I think it's going to be uphill battle. I'm excited to see the results.
I mean, for you guys, though, I will say your position is like a fresh seat because
Yeah.
you don't have an incumbent.
Exactly.
There's no one running.
Exactly.
So hopefully, You know, like your last election for the governor race was really well. I think that was historic. I remember tracking it.
very
Slavic
close.
Vote wasn't even in existence,
yet.
but it was really, really good. I mean, the guy was a lawyer, so obviously I followed it.
Yeah.
But and I feel like it was this time. It's like you don't have the incumbent, so
Right.
maybe that will help.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have so many people are running, and
That's
a lot of
good.
people who have a lot of credibility because they see this year as a very unique year. It's one of a kind, especially again no incumbent, and also the fact that nobody likes the governor that we have now, and it's just such a polarized time that we live in. So a lot
But
of
I
people.
will say, is the Secretary of State the one running? Is the
No, it's
opposing
so
or-
it's the House leader.
House leader? So the Secretary of State is not running. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna
Well, yeah,
say,
it was
if she was gonna run, she won the SOS election, even though people didn't think that she was gonna
Right.
win, and she did win.
Well, the person that is going to most likely get the nomination on the Democratic side is people say that she's like Kate Brown, but worse.
Yes, but she still won SOS, and that's what I was like.
Well, and I'm talking about the one that so SOS is not running. The lady
Okay.
that's currently positioned at SOS, it's Tina Kotek is the name. She's the majority leader in the House in
Okay.
Oregon.
Because the
and
SOS also had
she
that
was the
title,
majority.
which was she's worse than.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that's
true.
what I was thinking
That's
the
true.
same. But I just, that's why I was
Yeah.
like, if she's running, I will say she did pull off her election
Yeah.
if she was running. But that's good to hear that she's not.
Right.
How House leader.
But
That'll
I
be
think
interesting.
here's the curveball or something that nobody ever thinks about in this election, and that's going to probably throw everybody off. We have a third person that has a really good chance of winning, a third party, and that's
Okay.
the Independent Party.
Okay.
And she raised the most amount of money.
So outside of money, what makes you think that she is gonna win?
Well, she's
independents don't really pull votes.
right. Well, so for one, she is. She's. I think she was a Democrat, but she was more always like seen as a moderate. So and she always kind of there's like sometimes she aligned with Republicans, but most of the time Democrat.
Okay.
So I think there's just enough people who are not affiliated voters and independent voters who will not like either side. But I think it's too early to tell.
Okay.
After the primaries, we'll know if a few
Yeah.
people that do win the primaries that I can think of that'll definitely play an effect. But if there's a few people who are going to win, I think on the Republican side that might sway that a little
Yeah,
bit.
that makes sense.
So it's too early to tell. But as of now, looking at the donations, she's getting the most.
Yeah, well,
donations.
the guy, last year barely pulled any election, I can't remember the state, and he went to Dunkin' Donuts one time for a fundraiser and then still won the
Yeah.
election. That truck driver,
Right.
money is not an indicator anymore.
For sure.
you know?
It's definitely just.
It's
interesting.
just people that are, depending on the environment, if people are fed up, let's look at Virginia. That governor, it didn't make a breaking record in finances. In fact, not only did he win, he pulled 2 other positions along
Yeah.
with him, right? And that's groundbreaking because you typically don't get like a trio right off the bat in
Right.
one election, right? It's like 3 cherries on the cake,
Right.
right? So,
Well, a few people. I know one candidate has some of the staff that was working on that Virginia election.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
they actually have people from that. And
I will be meeting that person up here
good.
end of his son. I'll be meeting his son.
That's right.
So I'm excited end of this month. So
That's right.
it'll be great conversation.
Well,
to
sounds
have.
like I think you said you might even meet the governor himself.
Yeah,
maybe?
just tight schedule is what I'm looking at right now, but we'll see. We're
Well-
planning a trip with a friend to DC to do that, and hopefully that's sometime soon, probably before summer starts. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I mean, we'll kind of cross that bridge. But so yeah, I think what we can do next. I think we talked a lot about today, kind of the broader overview of midterms, and next month. After you have primaries, maybe next show, wherever.
I think
or
we'll
maybe
we'll
before.
have it like a week before the primaries.
Okay, so maybe we can narrow on the candidates and
Yeah.
actually give people names and who to look out for, and the names and things like that, so that people have a little bit better understanding of like who am I needing to vote
Right.
on.
Well, you can always check our website. We have we're gonna have more and more resources on there, a limited amount just because of the amount of candidates out there. So. I think the best way to get assistance with us is going to be just reaching out to us directly. So you can find us on Instagram, Slavic Vote. You can find us on our website with our contact information. So if you have a hard time with voting, you can always reach out. And I think hopefully next month we'll have a resource that will be very interesting to a lot of people. So we'll have a special announcement next month once we kind of develop that and talk more about it, and we'll bring you that with our next radio program, which could be a very interesting resource again that could help a lot of people.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And for myself, I want to say, I'm one person. So as people call me and ask me questions, I want to say follow Slavic Vote on social media. I think they're a bigger team. They're more able to do than I personally. So, and that's, sign up on their newsletter. Great place to get information. YouTube, if you want more context. And then obviously Instagram, Viber page, whatever else they're on. Because I will say I am horrible, especially during season times when people reach out to me for election questions. I'm just horrible because, things take over priority. So, it's SlavicVote.org is the website, at Slavic Vote PNW Pacific Northwest on Facebook. They've got all the info, and I think that's the best source for folks.
well, I would say if you want to get Lily's kind of input, you just reach out to us, because not only will you get us, and Lily's somewhat present as well whenever she has time. So you'll either not get Lily at all most times if you reach out to her directly, or just go to Instagram, reach out to us directly, and that'll be a way for you to get all of us at the same time and hopefully get your answer.
Yes, and we're here just to help you guys register, help you guys answer questions. So I know there's a few upcoming events coming up in April and May. Outreach events that Slavic Vote is doing that I'll get to be part of. We're out there in the community, so if you see a flyer, you need help, you want to come chat with us wherever we're at, don't skip that opportunity. It's a Sunday. Hopefully no one's working. So
well, I think we can probably, I think the one in May, I think, has already been confirmed.
Yes.
You want to briefly mention where it's
so
at?
being in Vancouver at the Father's House Church, Minnehaha Street off Vancouver Mall.
Which date?
It will be May
22nd, I think.
I want to say May. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It's that weekend,
yes.
22nd.
Yes. So, and then, we have a small special election up in April for Washington. Very small, very, very small. So most people won't get a ballot. So we're not really going to focus and address it. And if the folks that do, just contact Slavic Vote and ask for that help. But
yeah, you can always again for that's gonna be after the primaries in Oregon. So at that point, we'll be starting helping people kind of figure out just navigating the process. And if you haven't registered by that time, I know a lot of people come to us and say, "Hey, I was registered, but I never got a ballot."
Yeah.
What's your best answer for that?
Right. The best would be come to us earlier. Ballots get mailed out 2 weeks before. So if you haven't gotten it by that first Saturday, they get mailed up on Friday usually. If you haven't gotten it by Monday of that week, reach out to Slavic Vote right away, because we can surely do something, and we can get on the phone with you, go online, get your replacement ballot. That doesn't require you having to go into an office. This is for Washington specific. But, if you're reaching out really late, a lot of times what I tell people is there's not much I can do unless you can go to the office, which means you got to take time off. So be proactive. It doesn't take much steps. I mean, it's 5-10 minute phone call. We're on our phones all the time. Maybe we just skip a little bit of that movie show we're watching or whatever else we're doing. Don't skip family time, but, maybe something leisure you're doing.
I would say just take your family and have everybody check their voter registration
and so
status.
it really take that second, honestly, the best way to go about it. So don't delay, because that's really the kind of hard part to help folks is I can't do. And I can't go with them because I'm usually doing election support that day, either at a on-site somewhere or over the phone. And so is you, I know that. So.
Well, I encourage always, if you're very passionate about this, invite your family and friends during the election season. Have them bring your ballots. I know Lily does this all the time.
Yes.
She puts on some good food, some tea, and just has almost like a election party, where everybody just votes. Everybody helps each other if they need any kind of clarification. I think it just makes it more fun. It's very celebratory, just how it's supposed to be. I think it's
and it's every Sunday. You're gathering with family every Sunday usually. After church,
so that's a great idea, and I wish if my family was still here, I would have done that, but they're all in South Carolina.
You can build a new family, get a few friends.
Well, exactly. Well, we do that anyway. Yeah, we get together with friends and have a big watch party or something like that. So,
that's awesome.
But I'm always here to help and either pick up the phone or reach out to you, or even come if you can put together a good group of people, maybe a senior center. Well, yeah, exactly. And I've done that before.
Famous these days.
I've came to senior centers. We had some amazing grandmas who were probably more passionate about voting than some of the younger folks, which was
I wonder if they're disappointed now.
Well, I think they understand
No,
that
it's-
everything
yeah.
happens for a reason. So, again, we were about to wrap up our show. And just again, remember, voting is very important.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
especially this year. We mentioned some of the things. If you want to kind of get into some other topics, again, don't forget to you can look us up on YouTube. You can go on our website. All of our videos are archived there. And again, it's all on YouTube and podcast as well. That's available. So
Yes.
I know you have a podcast. Do you want to do a quick plug of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's called Law and Politics, and I'll have an episode going out later this week on talking about how can you immigrate to U.S. legally.
Alright.
So that will be fun. It's just a repeating, thing I talk about every day. So I finally got time and I'll put it together. And get that out there for folks, especially just because, sometimes it's easier to send that link than spend just time. But yeah, so it's more of, I usually just do whenever there's an urgent topic for the community that needs to be said. And I focus on the law and politics side, which reminds me, I will do a brief disclaimer. So SV Action is more partisan. So today I represent SV Action. So anything that we talked about, just keep in mind that Slavic Vote is a nonpartisan, and the only reason we're able to talk today is just because we do have a partnership with SV Action that just allows us to get a little more political, because our goal is to provide some education for you guys. And it's hard not to say, party lines or specific candidates. And we know the need of the community. You guys are always coming to us and saying, hey, could you help us educate? So SV Action is kind of that solution. So on the show today, we got a little bit more political because we have that partnership that allows us to do
Well,
that.
and this is a great resource for the community, because it's, again, removing that additional barrier from that community where they have a hard time voting, and this just gives them another additional resource to make it
Absolutely.
easier.
And any candidates we mentioned were personal views. I know myself, so it's not a representation of the community at all, or the organizations. It's just our views, and you're welcome to, if you want to do more research, or you're welcome to pick on that. I'm happy to share who I stand for and what I believe.
For
so.
sure. Yep. You can always find all of us on our personal Instagram as well, and get our personal opinions on there as well. And both of us do a pretty good job of posting our thoughts and feelings and different candidates
I
that
try to avoid that.
we like to do. We like to support. So again,
Yes,
thank you
thank
again
you.
for tuning in. You've been listening to Slavic Vote Live. Again, thank you for dedicating your time, your hour, listening to us. We always love to hear where you guys are coming from, where you guys are listening from. So if you can, give us a call, or at the very least, you can find this program on our YouTube, like I said, and leave a comment below where you're coming from. Oregon, Portland, other states. I know we have listeners from all across the United States and even in some other countries.
Yeah, let us
believe it
know
or
where
not.
you're at. Maybe we'll start something there. Or
Another-
maybe you might be starting something
Exactly. If you're in another state and you want to see something like this happen, reach out. We can give you some tips, and who knows where that would lead.
there. Yeah, absolutely. Let's change the sphere nationally.
Yep. Everything. If we don't like what we're seeing, we have full control over it.
Absolutely.
We can do something about it. Maybe not right away, but it takes steps. It takes slow steps, but things will change, and you bring more people to you. That's how we started. We were just basically wanting to bring some change and just stop. Get off the bench.
Yeah.
Get off the bench.
Yes.
So again,
Lady St. John.
that's right.
Gotta quote her there.
Speaking of her,
Yes.
she'll be on with us soon. Thank you again. Have a great day, and we will talk to you later.
Yes.
Bye.
Новости региона, выборы, кандидаты, стремления. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю в прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live дает голос славянской общине по всему северо-западу. Мы говорим и информируем о важном в Вашингтоне, Орегоне, Калифорнии. По четвергам в 17:00. Присоединяйтесь к прямому эфиру на 10:40 АМ. Ищите Slavic Vote в соцсетях. Мы намерены продолжать продвигать свое видение и оказывать любую необходимую поддержку сообществу, чтобы изменить ситуацию к лучшему. Slavic Vote Live.
Внимание!
Редакция медиахолдинга Slavic Family не несет ответственность за содержание рекламных сообщений и авторских программ.
You are listening to KXPD 1040 AM, Radio Slavic Family.
Riverview Community Bank предлагает кредитные карты, по которым вы не